Hey YouTube, welcome to the Secret Garden Homestead. My name is Christina and my husband's name is Ryan, and I wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight in why we decided to homestead in the Bay Area, California. Ryan and I got married back in 2018, and together we have Lily, Jackson, Madison, and Maverick, who was actually just born about 2 weeks ago via home birth. And so we're really excited to be adding him to our family. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and Ryan was born and raised in Southern California. But we met in the Bay Area, and so that's where we felt that God was calling us to stay. My parents actually own a cattle ranch that's a little over 100 acres right outside of San Francisco. It has like a beautiful farmhouse on it. We always thought that we wanted something really similar, like a big piece of land with a big farmhouse, something that we could also run cattle on and do an orchard, and that was always our dream. And so we really felt like God was calling us to stay in California and homestead here. We are a Bible-believing Christian family, and at the time that the pandemic hit in like 2019, 2020, we had been attending a really small Reformed church close to where we were living, and we remember we were on vacation and we got a call from the pastor that they had decided to pick up the church and move to Texas, and they were kind of asking all the families to kind of follow them. And we were like a really close-knit community, and so I think about like 50 to 60% of the families actually decided to move. And Ryan and I were talking, and we were like, we've always felt like God was calling us to stay in California. We've never felt like California was so far gone that we had to leave. But at the same time, like our whole community of people were leaving, and it got to the point where like you would be talking to someone in your community and they'd be like, oh yeah, we're moving to such and such a state. And it was like, oh, is anyone going to be left here in California? Everyone's leaving for places like Idaho or Texas or Tennessee or Missouri, probably leaving out a couple of states. And we totally understood because California is just like wildly expensive. Like to afford a place to live is crazy expensive. You have a lot of people who are like home sharing in order to buy a house, or going in with their in-laws, or kind of doing crazy mortgages just to afford a place to live here. Also, politics was like a huge one. I mean, you're talking about families wanting to raise their children, and there's just very differing views between the Christian church and what most people in California believe. And so the desire to leave came from a place of wanting their children to grow up in a world where people had similar values. And the third thing I would say is education. No one really felt comfortable putting their kid in public school, but private school was just so expensive that no one could afford to put 4 or 5 kids into private school. And so really for most people, the option was to leave. And for Ryan and I, we really battled with that. Like, okay, is God calling us to leave California, or is God calling us to stay and maybe adjust our expectations and kind of be a light in a pretty dark place? And so we told ourselves, we're going to parallel path. We're going to go to all these states and see if it's a place where we feel like God is calling us. But at the same time, we're going to start church hopping and look for a Reformed church that was relatively large so that our kids can make a lot of friends. And then also preferably like a homeschool community within that church. And so we went on search of like 2 very different things. Like, okay, are we moving to a different state, or are we going to find it here? And it turns out we traveled to a couple of those states, and they were beautiful states, but we just really felt like God was calling us to stay in California. And we actually ended up finding a community a Reformed church that was a couple thousand people with a huge homeschool community. And I mean huge from our standards. Like, my kids go to school with like 100 other kids from ages like preschool to high school. And it's a co-op. We meet once a week. But it's exactly like an answer to prayer. And at that point, when we found it, we were like, wow, like God is really calling us to stay. Like, our world isn't feeling like it's getting smaller and everyone's leaving anymore. Like, it actually feels like we can make California work. So we had found our church community, we had found our homeschooling community, but the only thing that we hadn't found yet, that God hadn't provided, was our home. And the church that we ended up finding was about 45 minutes to an hour away from where we were currently living. But we really had a desire to stay in the town that we were in because it had a lot of farmland. And I remember it was like 2022, maybe 2023. Like, Ryan and I had these dream properties that we'd like write down, and sometimes we'd write letters to people, and we'd always get turned down. Like, they didn't want to sell. But one day one of them went on the market, and we put in an all cash offer for full asking. And we really felt, we're like, okay, this is it. Like, we're gonna, like, God's making California work. And it was like on 30 acres. I think we ended up losing it to a developer. And we were just like gutted. We were like, God, why? Like, it was something we could afford, because it was pretty rundown, and it was gonna require like a ton of work. But that's why we could afford it. But then when we lost it, we were like, God, what are you doing here? Like, I don't understand. And so it took us a couple weeks to kind of like get ourselves together. And I remember telling Ryan, like, maybe God doesn't want us to stay in the town that we're at. You know, we're like kind of selfishly wanting this like large piece of property with a large home on it. But like, it is really far away from the community that we've been building. And so maybe God is saying that we need to start looking in the town where the kids' school's at and where our church is at. And out here, in order to be kind of close to those things, they only had like little 1 or 2 acre properties. Otherwise you kind of had to go like more farther out, and then what was the point of moving closer? And so I was like, let's just put our Zillow to like 1 acre or more and see what pops up. And then I remember that week this one house popped up, and it was a little bit over 1 acre, completely flat, with a 2,600 square foot home on it. The home is pretty outdated, but I remember looking at it and being like my husband loves to do home projects and DIY stuff. And so that was something I was looking for. I did not want like a turnkey home. I wanted something he could work on and we could put our fingerprint on. And I remember showing it to him, and he was like, that is a house I'd be interested in seeing. And so we went that Sunday and we went and saw it. And I mean, it was nothing of what we ever dreamed of, because it wasn't like a large piece of land or anything, but there was something like seriously special about it. We like kind of stewed on it for about a month, and I was praying about it, and I remember just being like, Ryan, like, this is the house. This is where God is calling us to be. And he kind of agreed, and he's like, we need to put in an offer. And so we did, and there happened to be another offer, but the offer was from a developer, and the woman who owned the house her husband had passed away, and he loved to garden, and she loved the property, and so she actually chose us. And so I'm actually here today. This is like one of the handful of times I've been here, because we just got the keys, and with the baby being born, I haven't had a chance to be out here. But we're here. What we believe is our forever home. I'm just really excited that God answered our prayers to be able to homestead in California. So this channel is going to be about renovating our house, so all the house projects, as well as gardening and building infrastructure in our backyard in the Bay Area, California.